This is Curated Currency. This is a NASDAQ market observation. This is not a signal. Today we're looking at NASDAQ on the 5-minute time frame. And what makes this session interesting is that the market actually gave us really clean progression throughout the day. Because if you look at this chart quickly, it just looks like a market that kept pushing higher. But when you slow down and follow the timeline, you can actually see how that market built pressure, released it, and then matured after the move. So let's walk through it from the left side of the chart and follow how the session developed. If you start over here like around 2300, moving into midnight, the market is gradually climbing. But notice the way that it's climbing. It's not exploding higher just yet. It's more so of a slow stair-step structure. Push higher, small pullback, push higher again. And that kind of behavior, it usually tells us that the market is building confidence gradually. Traders begin to believe that the path of least resistance again is simply higher. But the most important thing to remember is that the early moves like this, they often lead into some type of pause or compression/consolidation. Now, markets rarely move in one direction without first building some type of structure. So as we move into roughly 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, going into around 5 in the morning, the market begins rotating sideways. You start to see candles overlap more, momentum slows down, price stops trending cleanly, and starts negotiating again. This is what we call compression/consolidation. Compression is just basically the market building pressure. It's the market taking a breath, and this is usually the moment where traders start to lose patience, because when the market moves sideways like this, it feels like something needs to happen immediately. But in reality, the market is just preparing for that next phase. Now, watch what happens as we move towards 6 o'clock into 8:30 New York Stock Exchange open. Price dips lower several times and takes liquidity beneath these short-term lows. But every time the market does dip, notice something. It does not collapse. Instead, it stabilizes and starts reclaiming the structure again. Now, this is important because the reaction after liquidity gets taken tells you a whole lot about the underlying condition of the market. Here, the market keeps responding higher. That tells us that sellers aren't able to hold control very long, and that pressure begins building underneath the surface. Then we go into, the most important moment of this session. After, the New York Open at 9:30, 10 going into 11, the market finally releases the pressure. You can see the expansion higher, candles start to stretch, momentum increases, price stops negotiating and starts traveling. This is the cleanest expansion of the entire session. And usually this don't just come from not nowhere. They come after the market has spent hours building structure beforehand. Compression/consolidation builds the pressure. Expansion releases that pressure. And this is a textbook example of that process. Now we reach into, 15:30, moving into the evening session. The behavior begins changing again. Price is still elevated, but momentum slows down. You start to see more sideways movement. You see rebounds, pullbacks, rotations. This is what we call maturity phase of a move. Now, the market already made its strongest expansion earlier in the day, and now instead of continuing that trend aggressively, it begins trading inside smaller ranges. This is just the market, digesting that move that already happened. Then as we move toward the late evening session, price is still holding near the highs. But again, the market The market isn't expanding aggressively anymore. It's not doing nothing. It's rotating, which tells us that the session has shifted from expansion back into balance. Back into balance. And that's a normal cycle. So, if there's one thing to take from this session is this: market moves in phases. They negotiate, they compress, they expand, and eventually they mature. And on this chart, we've seen that full sequence play out. Early stair-step movement, compression during the overnight session, liquidity sweeps that get reclaimed, or that get reclaimed. Then a strong expansion around the late morning, and finally a slower rotation once the move had already played out. Once you start recognizing, these phases, the market becomes that much more easier to read because you are no longer reacting to every single candle. You are watching the behavior of structure. With that being said, all glory be to God. Ain't none of this possible without the man up above. Same system, different day. This is Curated Currency.